Welcome to Voluntarist Academy. This channel is dedicated to teaching natural law and to the abolition of slavery in the 21st century. Join me, James Cordiner, your guide through many important and some forgotten historical articles, along with interviews featuring today's most important voluntarist leaders that outline what we can and need to do today to further usher in a condition of real freedom for us and for the future. Voluntarism leads to real freedom. All other political philosophies allow a ruling class to engage in violence and coercion against the majority. Voluntarists reject the artificially indoctrinated belief system of statism in favor of true freedom through the voluntary interactions between free people. Voluntarist Academy will teach all things regarding the only ism that is fair for everyone. Subscribe today and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And on your way out, just remember, you own yourself, period. Welcome back to Voluntarist Academy. My name is James Cordiner. My guest today is Jason Bassler. Jason Bassler is co-founder of the Free Thought Project and has been featured in such publications as Reason, Infowars, RT, Rolling Stone, and The Tom Woods Show. Jason is also founder of Police the Police and was called, quote, one of the most extensive recorders of law enforcement misbehavior in America by Rolling Stone magazine in 2018. He is also the co-founder of the United for a Common Ground Media Summit. Jason, your work is the stuff of legends, man. Thank you for being here. It really is an honor. Personally, like your memes and Facebook pages helped me tremendously when I was really starting to get vocal. So I just wanted to give you a tip of the cap and personally thank you. And I guess I'd like to start out. I kind of like to ask all the first time guests kind of just to give us like a brief rundown on, was there a single event that woke you up to the corruption of government or that set you on the path that you're on?
Sure, brother. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words there. And I know we don't really know each other well, but I was looking forward to this conversation. Anytime I see black and yellow in somebody's profile picture, it's like, all right, automatic, done, going to be on that podcast. Thanks for having me. So here we are. But yeah, man, one single event that's hard to kind of boil down for me. I grew up in the Bay Area in California, and I think there's just kind of a counterculture mentality that is kind of couched into the youth in that area. So I grew up, in the punk rock scene, the surf skater scene. That's kind of big, kind of popular in that area, and I think that was kind of my foundation. But if I had to point at just one single event, even though I was doing some activism prior to the Occupy Wall Street movement, that was probably the one, that was probably the catalyst that really got me started and made me kind of acknowledge that I had a blind spot in my own activism, which I didn't have an ideological foundation. I was interested in activism. As you pointed out, I think most people kind of have a sense, a general idea that there is some deep-seated corruption in government, but I couldn't tell you exactly what that was during my, awakening period. All I knew was Republicans are bad, and that was basically it. So I've transcended, pretty, pretty broadly since then. I've expanded my own worldviews. I've really refined my own ideological beliefs and my values. And but yeah, if I had to point to one, that's kind of where I learned about the great Ron Paul, and he was a great catalyst as well to really cementing a lot of the beliefs that I even currently kind of hold on to. So yeah, I'd be happy to get into that more, but that's kind of the short version.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, Occupy Wall Street, that was a game changer for myself as well. There's like a series of events, right, for some of us that happen over time that chip away at that hard stone that is statism, and it comes to fruition and like guys like your work, like that have your caliber of work and a whole huge group of others that have similar caliber of work as yourself. Um, but yeah, thank you for that answer. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother.
What are in your opinion though the biggest obstacles today that maybe humanity is facing in the fight for freedom? And
It's a
The
good
follow up would
question. Well,
be go ahead.
yeah, this is something I talk about a lot. And to me, if we're going to change hearts and minds, what we need to do is have some intellectual integrity, intellectual consistency. And unfortunately, I just don't see a lot of that in society. We see, the left really kind of uh, intertwined with some of their beliefs that a lot of times, that they might be a bit erroneous or they might seem a bit hypocritical. We could say the same thing about the right. Uh, Sometimes the right is just, surfing on their political identity. They don't really have a strong foundation of principle. And anytime you challenge these people, that's what you get in return. You get ad homs, you get the fallacies, you get a lot of indications that people are, committed to their political identity. But what you don't get is a lot of logical discourse, backed with evidence and reason. So I believe that's probably one of the biggest things. And I don't think that's something that is unintentional. I very much believe that the media and government does everything it can to divide us, to deceive us, to distract us. And, if people are actually paying attention, which, there has been an upswing of people since COVID years that have been kind of more aware of what's going on around us, a lot of times they get sucked into the tribalism aspect of things and the political identity. Um, I don't want to be a hypocrite here. Obviously, being a libertarian anarchist, I'm not going to say I'm completely devoid of, political identity, but I do think that being a libertarian anarchist, there's more nuance to our views. We've done probably a little bit more research, investigation into our principles and values compared to the average normie right winger or leftist. So I do, I don't want to toot my own horn here or say that we're intellectually superior, but it does appear that that's kind of the case, especially when you start to look at a lot of the trends recently of the way things are moving and shifting. These are all things that libertarians have been talking about for years. We just heard Trump talking about cutting back the IRS, stuff like that. We've been saying taxation is theft for forever. The Department of Education, we've been saying the same thing. Is a total boondoggle, total mess, and it's being cut apparently. So a lot of these things, we've kind of won the culture war, and it might not be outright, it might not be overt that we're getting the credit that we deserve, but a lot of the positioning of things, the way things are headed, it definitely seems like the libertarian ANCAPs, anarchists, voluntarists have had I don't know, a pretty profound effect on, shifting those.
Do you think what Trump is doing with all those cuts or anything, all that stuff is possibly paving the way for something much, much worse?
Yeah, yeah. And if you have been paying attention to my Twitter account, that's pretty much all I've been talking about lately. And here's the tough one, man, is I don't want to be, what the critics call black pilled, and I don't want to get too caught up in the black and white thinking. But Trump has done some decent things so far, and I'm somebody who was extremely critical of his first term. I was one of those people that never really shut up about all the lies he told. He was certainly not an anti-war president, as the right like to champion him as. But there has been some shifts with Elon coming in, and that's a whole nother can of worms as well. But we have to give credit where it's due. There has been some reduction in the size of government. Cutting something like USAID is huge. Like I just mentioned, the IRS, Department of Education, these things are significant. But there does seem to be kind of something brewing in the background, and I don't feel like enough people are really paying attention to that. A lot of people are watching the left hand while the right hand continues to do things behind the scenes. If you look at the people that Trump surrounded himself with, not only are they kind of avid Israel first Zionists, but many of them are kind of deeply intertwined with the tech community, and I'd go so far as even to saying are full blown technocrats. So that side of things is certainly concerning to me. Now we've already seen a little bit of a shift, even from some of the positions from the Argentina president Javier Milei, where he, came into position as a president who was, somebody who read Rothbard and somebody who was very much, supposedly understanding of the libertarian principles, but we're already seeing some shifts with his administration into this AI kind of pre-crime policing and more in that direction that some of us have been warning about. So if that's going to be the playbook for the new Trump administration, which it appears that it could be, and we're already starting to see indications of that. I'm a little bit worried, and especially because the right is cheering so loud for a lot of what's happening between RFK, being nominated and Elon kind of taking the reins over the federal government. Again, I'm not black and white here. There is nuance. There are some good things happening, but we also need to remain vigilant and stay skeptical. And I just don't feel like I'm seeing a lot of that. So that's why I'm being so vocal about kind of pushing back about everything that's happening here, because there's enough people already cheerleading and praising everything that's going on. So I feel like I need to add some balance to the force here with pushing back against it.
Even though I was like 12, right? But maybe in my early teens, this all kind of has the same tone as when they passed the Patriot Act and they were cheering on the like all the post 9/11 stuff. It has like the same tone where
Sure.
you're cheering on your own oppression. You're laughing your way to the to the slaughterhouse type of feeling. And I notice that, and it kind of disturbs me. I just want to know, like, if you kind of feel the same tone as post 9/11.
Yes and no. It's hard because the left is so skeptical of Elon and Trump that I feel like they're really blowing some stuff out of proportion. But yeah, there are some big changes happening here. And if we're talking about a democratic republic, which, a lot of people kind of frame the US as being, then it's definitely being gutted from the inside out right now, and I think that might be something to be slightly concerned about. At the same time, this is a lot of this stuff is what the libertarians and the right and the conservatives have been kind of asking for, is a lot of this reduction. I mean, there's obviously government waste, and it's not just waste, it's cronyism, right? Like, let's be a little more accurate. But there are some big things that are happening, and I just don't feel like they are, yeah, getting the recognition. One of those things being, I just recently read about the agency of ICE is actually recruiting contractors right now to create AI models to scan and observe social media for anybody who is speaking negatively about the ICE agency or any of the actors involved within that agency. And so, again, what I was kind of just pointing to with Malay and his kind of shift down in Argentina with more of this AI driven biometric surveillance state, that's one that concerns me because this is exactly what people like Trump's friend Peter Thiel, Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, the CIA tied Oracle. This is exactly, this is their wheelhouse. This is exactly what they've been pushing for. And obviously there's more to it than that if we're going to get into like the Israel conversation, the fact that, billions have already been sent to Israel. And this is after Trump has, talked about cutting foreign aid, well, except for Israel, of course, and the whole takeover of Gaza and turning that into the Riviera, as he's claimed to do, and turning those that strip of land into beautiful houses by the sea or whatever. I mean, that whole thing is completely ridiculous. And I don't know if this is just the art of the deal with Trump kind of, maneuvering his leverage that he has, or if this is just kind of giving Israel the green flag, saying, "Go for it, guys! Like whatever happens, if you want to continue in this, annexation and this ethnic cleansing, then go for it. You have our blessing." And I could keep going down the list, but I feel like those are two things that probably are worth noting that seem very concerning to me. And yeah, it doesn't seem to be getting any pushback from the right. Not to mention the free speech implications of this. The right's supposed to be the champion of the Constitution and the First Amendment, and they're just kind of turning a blind eye to this stuff. So, yes and no. There are certainly worrisome aspects that do kind of channel back to 9/11 and the Patriot Act and stuff like that. But I'm just so hesitant to really like point a finger at some of the stuff that the left seems to be more worried about. To me, it doesn't have as much legs as the technocratic surveillance state encroachment.
Yeah, just that, what was that project called? Stellar Wind way back then. It kind of like, I don't know, like the digital IDs, the surveillance systems, it's all the same. It's the same
Yep.
as what they were saying back then.
Not to mention the mRNA vaccines, and we're gonna, spend $500 billion on this Project Stargate that Trump's been touting, and we're gonna have a cancer a cancer vaccine. Uh, yeah, there's just a lot going here, and I mentioned this on a recent podcast, but it does feel like it's intentional that there is so much movement and momentum within the first few weeks. I guess we're coming up here in a couple days on a month now that Trump actually has been president, but the first few weeks were breakneck speeds, man. I mean, the news cycle couldn't move fast enough for all these executive orders that Trump was signing. And I don't think that's by accident. Again, I do feel like that's intentional. I feel like what it was is that Trump and his new administration have caught on to how the mainstream media works. And if they were going to ram through a bunch of this stuff, well, what better way to do it than, really fast? That way, the mainstream media, the left, can't really mount up, their opposition and combating some of these executive orders and stuff because it's happening so fast that American people just don't have the bandwidth to really pay attention to all of it. So it's kind of the move fast, break things approach, it seems. And, they're certainly been effective with that. Now, if effective in the way that we want it to be, as far as pro liberty, I think that's a different story, a different, question. But ultimately, things are moving very fast. It's exciting as a journalist, but it's also a little frightening.
Well, I mean, the panopticon is supposed to be frightening.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to be paying attention to it. I don't, yeah. So I think that's part of it for sure.
Um, do you, so you're no stranger to censorship. Your
Very
Facebook
true.
pages have been censored multiple times. More recently, the excuse me, tongue-tied. The Free Thought Project 4.0 has been hacked. Um,
Indeed.
let's talk about that a little bit because it seems as though it's very much targeted, and typically you see people targeted like that. I mean, a lot of times they kind of just like give up, and you haven't. So what keeps you going? And is it like the love of the game? And how do we how do we combat such censorship?
What keeps me going? Great question, man. Yeah, that's not something I've really touched on a lot, but I have invested my life into this. After the Occupy Wall Street movement, there was a clear demand for the type of information I was putting out, including the police accountability stuff. And it's resonated so strongly with me over the years that I don't have any doubts that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And yeah, we've hit a lot of trials and tribulations, a lot of hurdles and speed bumps. We, as you mentioned, have lost a lot of followers over the years. In 2018, we lost nearly 6 million fans when both Facebook and Twitter censored us on the same day. So it has been something that's been extremely difficult. And I could get into all that as well. We were targeted by DC think tanks, basically. And we actually had some proof more recently that that was the case. And hopefully we could kind of move forward with a lawsuit. But what keeps me going, honestly, man, is my kids. It's future generations. It's recognizing and realizing where we're at now, and knowing that my kids are going to be generally. We'll see how things play out here over the next 4 years, but generally, a lot less free than I am at this current time in my life, and I'm much more less free than my parents were. So it's kind of a snowball effect. And I also am somebody who believes that if you obtain this information and you have this knowledge, that you are responsible for sharing it. I'm not the smartest person on social media. I'm not the smartest person in independent media. But I have heart. I keep doing this regardless of how many times we've been knocked down. And I think that consistency there is something that's worth pointing at and appreciating, because a lot of times that's all it is, just continuing to show up. And yeah, so again, I'm not, anything special. A lot of people could probably be doing the same thing that I am. You had some kind words for me there in the beginning, but if you just stay consistent with your messaging, try to stay consistent with your principles and your values, and share the information that you think is important for people to know, people resonate with that. They take notice, and you know, authenticity repeated is what builds trust. So I think I've built trust with my audience. I think they know that I'm not bought and sold like many other independent right-wing influencers. We're learning even more now, even bigger outlets and bigger organizations than just the right-wing influencers that kind of popped up over the COVID years. But now with a lot of these disclosures coming out, yeah, there's been a lot of paid off media within the US. So I think people are hungry for the information that myself and the Free Thought Project, people like the editor in chief at the Free Thought Project, Matt Agaris, puts out. We've had a great team at the Free Thought Project over the years, which, it's one of those things that definitely broke my heart when we did lose all of our fans and followers because we had to let our entire team go. But we've had a lot of great people helping, and that certainly, keeps the ball moving forward. So, again, I want to give credit where it's due. But man, it's just important. I don't feel like with all the noise that's out there on social media that people really stay focused on the principles. And that's something that we've always tried to do while also kind of blurring the lines and not couching it into too far of like a libertarian sphere or using the terminology or rhetoric that maybe the left or right really expects. Oftentimes I'll get people, calling me a leftist, and the same day in the same post, I'll have people calling me, a right winger. So I kind of like that. We've always kind of blurred the lines there because it makes people more focus on the information that we're trying to get out there. So I think that's a probably long meandering answer for your question there, but
No,
hopefully I
absolutely
got
not.
some substance in there.
No, that approach inspires like critical thinking, builds like the intellectual self-defense
Sure.
that people like Richard Grove have
Yes.
called it,
Big
and
fan.
yeah, me too. Um, so yeah, it's just that approach is really healthy. In fact, I believe that it actually captures people's attention a whole lot better because it kind of sounds like stuff they've never heard before. They're like,
Sure.
wait a minute, what? That kind of thing. A lot of people that are ready for the information tend to stick with it when they hear the nuance and a new approach, when they think that everything's binary and there's like this little space in the middle where it's like, no, 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 no. And that middle isn't made of both sides. The middle is something independent of itself, but it still lays right there in the middle. And when people, I'm a big proponent of giving people the time that they need to actually be accepting of the information, because if you're pressuring people into it, it's actually a violation of the principles that we hold near and dear to our hearts. So all you can really do is put the information in front of people and hope that they bite on and they start learning more. Um,
Absolutely.
but that brings me to another point that I wanted to ask your opinion about, because something I'm a big fan of is teaching people patience. Now we have Trump in office, and I was actually just talking to my wife about this the other day, and it's like only been a month, but it feels like it's been 3 years. And you touched upon that because of how rapidly things have been happening. The overwhelm of the bandwidth that you referred to it as is very true. I completely agree with you on that. Um, so with the idea of teaching people patience, and there's a lot of anarchists and voluntarists out there who are ready for tomorrow to be the first day without government. I appreciate those folks. They're great people. I love them, and but me for one, I recognize that the massive majority of people out there are not ready for that. Um, could this be the evidence that we need to be patient with a slow rollback of government, because the people that are alive have an entitlement to that life. And if government were shut off tomorrow like a light switch, right? There's potential for chaos that we've never seen before. Um, what are your, if that's not too much, like what are your thoughts on that?
At the Free Thought Project, we've always taken the hearts and minds approach. And I feel like while we support the multi-pronged approach of, trying to also do things within the realm of politics, with also doing boots on the ground, civil disobedience, protests, activism, stuff like that, we've always just focused more on the winning the hearts and minds. And it's exactly what you mentioned there. It's planting seeds, right? We're just trying to plant seeds for people who are on the fence, people who aren't really familiar with their own ideological, principled views. And a lot of people don't have ideological principled views. A lot of times, as we were touching on before, it's just this tribalistic mentality, right? So, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think this touches on two different things. I think this touches on kind of the hearts and minds approach to kind of winning people over, because ultimately that is going to be the most peaceful process in any type of transition. We're not going to have a very peaceful transition through the ballot box or through the ammo box, like if we are going to end up having some type of bloody revolution. I mean, that's not ideal. And as you mentioned, a lot of people are still, kind of in a mindset that government is our protector. The government is here to, protect our rights, to uphold our liberties, to protect us from even things like, red food dye and stuff like that. So, with that being the case, I think what you were saying there is that there are anarchists who maybe probably prefer more of a principled view, principled approach with some of this stuff. And there's also anarchists out there who have been pushing for more of a decentralization through politics. The Libertarian ANCAP faction that did vote for Donald Trump, and this kind of comes down to the pragmatism versus principle debate, within the liberty movement. And that's something that I touch on all the time in my podcasts, because if we're going to be 100% principled about things, then like, hey, look, like we wouldn't even be voting. We wouldn't even be participating within the system, right? Like the non-aggression principle, government is violence. And government, the only tools that it has to enforce laws, to fund itself is violence. We wouldn't even be participating with the political process. But I think there was a movement, particularly spearheaded by the Mises Caucus during the COVID years, to decentralize and get our people, get libertarians in positions of government, because the mentality was like, look, like during the COVID years, the restrictions, the mandates, the policies, they were pretty hardcore left leaning, right? A lot of the left controlled various government institutions, including local government. So, what the thought process in that was that we need to do a better job getting our people into city council positions, getting people into sheriff positions, anything really that's local and obtainable. And that, I don't have a problem with that either. And I'm kind of in between again here. I know it sometimes could be kind of annoying, but I could see the arguments for both sides, because I understand nuance, right? Like I understand not wanting to participate whatsoever with the federal government. That's been kind of my position. But at the same time, my friends who, did found and run the Mises Caucus, and all the people who ended up within the decentralized revolution, the campaign that they had to get their more libertarians and anarchists into local government positions. Like, I'm not going to tell them that they're doing something wrong. I think there's a plenty of libertarians that want to be that kind of edgelord, saying, well, my way is the only way. I'm the only true libertarian, right? No, I do feel like this is a multi-pronged approach. Now it just kind of comes down to what you believe is the most advantageous for moving the ball forward towards liberty. And one last thing I'll say here is that politics is downstream from culture. So if we are going to want to see some type of shift more on like a broad scale, I don't know if always being completely 100% aligned with our principles is really going to do that. While I believe it's important and it's something that I personally do, we're not going to see a lot of movement from the mainstream, or even what we've seen kind of since then with, this whole podcasting revolution. A lot of people who were probably responsible for Trump's, win last November was because of this whole podcast circuit. And so we have to kind of change those hearts and minds first. And I think that you have to play ball to a certain extent to get there. But again, it all comes down to like what you feel comfortable with. And I personally just I can't like I can't I can't participate with the state. I don't comply. I try not to participate. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to get too into the weeds here as far as all the things that I don't do that the government wants me to be. But yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
No, I hear what you're saying. I mean, David versus Goliath, you know what I mean? Like that's sort of what we're kind of living out here. And
Sure.
yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. Where like, yeah, the principled approach, like for any individual is a great thing to have, right? And that's what we got to do because I mean, if we're if we're really upholding our principles, natural law works in really, really great ways, and the fight will be won, right? But at the same time, every now and then you have to realize that it's just, there's concessions that need to be made,
Yeah.
and it sucks. It really does. It really does.
Well, not upholding our principles turns us into the left or the right, and like that would just kind of make more noise on the political spectrum. And I think that's the one thing that we do have going for us is I don't think the modern day conservative could really point towards the principles that they uphold anymore. Now, the left has kind of more like um, a vague understanding of a lot of the things that they champion, but even still, it's not as concrete as the foundation that we have. And I feel like that's a blessing, and I don't want to stray too far away from that. But as you mentioned, yeah, there needs to be some concessions. Now, it gets a little more tricky when we talk about like the two-party system and, is it Kamala or is it Trump? And like which one are you going to vote for? Well, are you going to be pragmatic? Are you going to vote for Trump? It's like, yeah, I just can't bring myself to do it. But I will also say that at the end of the day, I'm glad that Kamala didn't become president, and not to say that I'm very much happier that, I'm a lot happier that Trump did. I mean, the writing's on the wall there as far as the two difference in personality and policy and everything. But both are, in my opinion, not going to be great for the US. And we'll see. Again, I'm trying to stay optimistic here. I'm not trying to be too black-pilled, but I think I put out a tweet a few days ago, like regardless of what party, they're going to exploit the empire, the dying empire until the wheels fall off. And I feel like that's already, I mean, we already seen indications of that. I think it was like $400 million that just got allocated to Tesla trucks for the federal government, and like, of course, behind the scene, they're scrubbing off the Tesla part of the public announcement. So people aren't pointing fingers, but like we're already seeing collusion. And you know, so the idea that it's not going to happen under this Trump administration is just delusional. It's okay when we do it. I think that's kind of the mentality the right has right now. But it's either way, it is still going to be exploitative, and they're going to continue to pad each other's pockets, pad their friends' pockets, and I think that's just become the norm when you have control over the gun in the room, which is the state, and political power. So yeah, buckle up.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be a bumpy ride. And the part that's probably the most worrisome for me too is that everybody just thinks that like things are going to be a lot less challenging over the next 4 years. And again, I'm trying to also have that caveat in the back of my mind, but we got to stay skeptical. And I'll probably keep saying that over and over again in this interview, but yeah, we do need to stay skeptical with these people.
Yeah, a healthy amount of skepticism is just that. It's a really healthy approach to have. And we were
Absolutely.
dealing with we're dealing with this institution that has a monopoly on violence. And that's what I was kind of touching on when it comes to, how we wish to uphold our principles, but every now and then there's a concession that needs to be made because um, we do a lot better work outside of like a prison than we would if we were incarcerated, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta like you brush up against these people, and next thing you know, if you're not paying taxes, for instance, and they find out, what do you think's going to happen? Like it's a tightrope walk.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, man. And it's very real to be targeted. We've covered numerous stories over the years by people who have been targeted by the state, even in local government, especially if you're doing any type of police accountability activism. I mean, yeah, you paint a target on your back, so you do have to be mindful about your approach. Absolutely.
Now, speaking about incarceration, does Ross Ulbricht's pardon give you hope for Roger Ver?
Yes and no. I mean, that was certainly a great first step. I would love to see more political pardons. Absolutely. And, this is an opportunity for Trump to really cement his legacy, his own legacy, and being a president who reversed some of the damage done by previous regimes. But at the same time, I don't know if you happen to see this. Elon Musk was asked about Roger Vere's situation, and he said, well, like he renounced his citizenship, so like you don't have the perks of being in the membership club anymore or whatever. And I don't think I completely got that quote accurate, but it's something along those lines. And we know how tight, Elon and Trump are. But at the same time, they're talking about repealing, the war on crypto, and they signed, Trump signed a bill to end the CBDC research, and they're talking about, repealing and possibly ending, well, right now, I don't want to jump ahead. Right now, they're talking about what 15,000 IRS agents, like firing at least 15,000 IRS agents. That's great. Like that's a wonderful thing. So the ball, yeah, it could be moving more in that direction, but you know everything that we've seen with the way they've treated Roger doesn't give me any indication or hope. Um, we've seen other crypto maxis, other crypto influencers who have had IRS issues and trouble with the Internal Revenue Service, and they were able just to pay off their fines. They negotiated, they were able to talk about it, and fines or whatever. They were able to pay their extortion fees and not be held prisoner anymore, but they're not even giving Roger that option. Not to mention the feds, the DOJ actually kicked in the door to his attorney's office and completely raided. I don't know if you heard that, but they raided his attorney's office over this. So like the whole, privilege of the client attorney thing, I mean, that's been kind of erased and eradicated from the whole equation. And of course, the mainstream media doesn't touch on that at all. They're too busy talking about how Roger, evaded his taxes. Well, guess what? Like back in 2017, there wasn't clearly defined regulations for crypto, especially paying taxes on Bitcoin. And on top of that, Roger hired the best of the best tax attorneys and consultants to, dot the I's and cross the T's and do all that stuff before he even ended up leaving the country. So I think this is more of a politically targeted attack on Roger. Part of that might be because of his book on, the hijacking of Bitcoin, which he put out. I believe it was like 27 days before he was arrested, somewhere around there. I think it was like 3 weeks, which is strange, right? Like it's strange. 27 days after he writes this book, he gets arrested in Spain on a charge from 2017. I mean, how many years did they have, to mount these allegations against him and charge him and arrest him? And they wait until 27 days after his book's out and published. So it could be some of that as well. And if that's the case, then yeah, I'm not very hopeful. It sounds like they're just trying to shut him up because there is speculation that even though that Trump has apparently, called off the CBDC research, that what the true kind of psyop was, and maybe not from the beginning necessarily, but was to use Bitcoin for that same exact purpose as kind of like a CBDC of its own right. And when you start looking at some of the allegations that Veer put forward in his book, I guess it could make sense.
Is that what you mean when you refer to, how did you put it, the hijacking of Bitcoin?
Yeah, so basically the allegations are somewhere around the block size wars, there was intelligent agency actors who intentionally kind of bottlenecked the Lightning Network, making it very, very slow in the transaction speeds. And I don't remember the exact statistics, but it's something crazy like it's 6 transactions per second, where like a MasterCard does like 30,000 transactions per second. So instead of it being something that was what, Satoshi Nakamoto and his white papers originally intended to be kind of a peer-to-peer cryptocurrency, a way to avoid the central banks. Now it's become more of like a store of value, digital gold. And in the book that Roger wrote, that's kind of the theory he puts forward, is that this whole thing has been co-opted over the course of time. And there's some credence to that too, right? Because like, look, like this was the one technology that actually challenged their monopoly, their financial monopoly through the central banks and everything. So the idea that they would want to co-opt that and kind of steer it in the direction that they would want it to be in doesn't seem completely, you know, unrealistic.
Yeah, when major banks start buying up huge like stores of Bitcoin, it really perks my ears up and gives me pause. Like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, or even the U.S. government buying Bitcoin reserves. I mean, it sounds great in theory, being a Bitcoin guy since 2015 or whatever. But at the same time, like if Nancy Pelosi was saying we're going to put millions of dollars towards these stocks as a reserve, people would be losing their minds. I mean, there'd be red flags everywhere. And I know that I do feel like Bitcoin has kind of gained some momentum just on the around the globe. I mean, obviously, people are using it more. It's become more popular within governments. Bukele, has kind of adopted it, and for better or worse, I know there's kind of different critiques on his adoption, but nevertheless, it did show some promise there as being something that could really challenge the financial systems. And so the idea that they, hijacked it doesn't seem crazy to me. And that's even more of a reason to, it's probably not a bad idea to own some Bitcoin, but at the same time, to really shift towards more of the privacy oriented coins like Monero, Zano, the Pirate Chain, stuff like that.
Yeah, diversifying your investments is probably a good plan at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, I want to talk to you like as we're gearing toward wrapping up. I want to talk to you about like police accountability and your work with doing the police stuff. Um, what do you what do you do like when you're in in an interaction with these people? Like, how do you talk to them? Do you ask them a lot of questions? Like, run me through like a basic, overview of like what you do during a police interaction.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, if you do want to have a negative experience with a law enforcement officer, certainly be rude. Definitely, you know, be kind of mouthy. I think that's kind of the general mentality from people who are anti-government, anti-authority. And look, I totally get it, but what these people crave the most is subservience. And I'm not saying you have to get down on a knee, but if you give them that first reasonable interaction and being cordial and allowing them to believe that they have authority over you, it's going to go much smoother. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to everything I've been saying in this interview so far, but hear me out. Once you establish that, then you're basically getting yourself out of the red zone, out of the danger zone, right? At that point, you're more able to negotiate, you're more able to ask questions, assert your rights, things like that. So, first and foremost, yes, just be firm, but be polite. I think that's one of the most important things we could do. Um, and obviously, knowing your rights is important, knowing how to apply them, not consenting to searches, all that stuff is absolutely important. But it's the subservience, man. Like if they catch wind that you aren't being subservient enough, or if you don't even respect their authority, they're going to make your life hell. It doesn't matter if you broke a law or if you didn't. They will find a way to make your life hell, and they will charge you with something. We call it contempt of cop. It's this idea that you have to uh, comply with at least the belief in their authority. And that's just the way police culture is in our society right now. It's deeply ingrained into the insular police culture. And that's probably the greatest taboo that you could do. They don't, sometimes they will even look twice, look past breaking a law or some type of traffic infraction. But if you challenge their authority, that's going to cause some instant clashing. So that's probably, one good place to start.
Man, I've asked police officers after the initial encounter. I've straight up asked them, okay, what if there were a law that was passed that is clearly a violation of human rights? Would you enforce that law? And I got to tell you, man, the response is I ask that every time, right? It's a very polite question. It's just and it's pretty disturbing the answers that we get.
Well, yeah, I mean, law enforcement officers, they could actually be rejected from the hiring process if they're too intelligent. So, and look, I'm not one of these people who says like all cops are bad. I get the sentiment. Every cop is an individual, right? So let's just not be collectivists and put them all into the same kind of camp. But at the same time, it is the institution that is the problem. It is the institution that gives them this carte blanche that they can behave that way. But they're all order followers, and that's kind of the crux of it, right? Is that if they weren't order followers, then they wouldn't be police officers, and they have to follow orders regardless of how immoral they are. And I'd say, just to put a finer point on that, all atrocities throughout history have been at the hands of order followers, right? If you look at all the wars, if you look at the soldiers and police, the police brutality, things have not gotten any better in this country, by the way, through the massive protests during 2020 and the George Floyd stuff, even before that, all the national protests. Last year was the most dangerous year for American citizens on record. There was more police killing people, more police killing Americans last year than any other year on record. So the idea that things are getting better isn't necessarily the case. And the idea that we could simply reform police through incremental legislation is completely ridiculous. You know what does actually create change within law enforcement? It's these things, man. It's a phone. It's recording police when they're doing something wrong, something illegal, if they're abusing their authority. We put it out there in a viral video, and that's actually what creates accountability, what creates the shifts and the changes. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right, James. It's all about following orders. And if they weren't, then they wouldn't be employed by the institution of law enforcement.
I think that one of the better approaches to kind of stop the order following madness is to teach kids correct the correct way. That order following is horrible. Uh, at the same time, though, we still have the present moment to be concerned about, and I'm of the opinion that the police and the military are among the most brainwashed of anyone because of this perceived authority that they're allowed to carry out on behalf of the violence of the state.
Correct.
Anyone that would be willing to do that, there's got to be something wrong in their brain, And you mentioned that they don't have a level of intelligence to see through the the bullshit, for
Mhm.
lack of better terms. So where do we how do we correct for that? Well, you got to teach kids the proper way, and
Absolutely.
you guys have just wrote a children's book uh, called Little Free Thinkers Know Your Rights. I'd like for you to be able to tell the audience about that. Tell me about that because
Sure,
I only
brother.
just heard about that the other day when you told me.
Yeah, man. So I have a copy right here. So I know it's blurred. I don't know if you're able to see it, but we did write this book. It took a few years. You'd be surprised the learning curve on writing a children's book and getting it illustrated and all that. Yeah, it took much longer than we thought it would, but we're proud of it. It's for kids like probably 6 to 11, 6 to 12, or somewhere in that general age range. But you're right, man. This is something that we would see a lot during the course of the Free Thought Project when we were writing, two or three police related articles every day. Is that a lot of times they target and focus on the youth, the younger generations, the teens, and even younger, and even younger. So what we were saying is that a lot of times through the propaganda and indoctrination, which you were kind of just touching on, a lot of people just don't know how to interact with police. They don't know their rights. They believe that they have to, yeah, basically bow down and do everything that they say. So this was written in an attempt to really give children that foundation of knowing their rights. And, also as you touched on here, like we're not living in Ancapistan yet, right? Like we're not in this completely free world. We still kind of have these boundaries and guardrails up through the paradigm that we're living that's kind of based in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So that's more of the terminology that's baked into this book is more of like coming from the constitutionalist point of view. And I totally get it, right? Like it's just some scribbles on some parchment paper that was written hundreds of years ago. Like where's the social contract? Where's our obligation to this piece of paper? Like there is none. Like I get the anarchist argument against the Constitution, but at the same time, as I was just saying, like we are in this paradigm and we're currently in this paradigm, and until that changes, like we need to know how to navigate it safely, especially our kids. So the book, the main character in the book is Officer Jody right here. She's actually a real life whistleblower, somebody who was fired from her own police department for blowing the whistle. And we figured after connecting with her and having her on our podcast that she would be the ideal candidate for being the main character in the book. But the book touches on a bunch of different stuff and really kind of like a gentle approach. It's not going to be overly over the top with the anarchist rhetoric or anything like that. Again, this is kind of more for young children, right? So we talk about the First Amendment, freedom of speech. We touch upon man, a bunch of different stuff, due process, a bunch of different stuff. So it's great for just feeling like you're doing something to plant the seeds, as we were saying, plant the seeds in your child's head. And at the same time, you could read the book and wait for maybe a little bit until they get older to really have that conversation about how police aren't necessarily our friends. But this will at least give them the information they need to be able to handle some type of encounter with a cop if they were to, yeah, have one.
I mean, the programming is in everything. Like it's all in all the cartoons, it's in all the comic books. There's not a quote unquote hero out there that at some point in their heroism doesn't rely on the police or the military or the government sanctioning their heroism or something like that. And I think that is like inculcating the obedience to the state in these children's minds. Uh, when my kids are watching a cartoon or something and situations like that arise, I'm just vocal about it and be like, and just say like, no, that doesn't have to be like that.
Sure.
Just kind of combat the programming with some better ideas, right?
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, look, like I think that idea of having a protector figure in society isn't necessarily even something that starts at a young age. I mean, it does start at a young age, but even obviously people our age still hold on to that belief. But I don't think that's unusual. And I think we all kind of want to have some security that there is some type of element in society that is looking out for the greater good. But here's the kicker, guys. It's not a monopoly on law enforcement, right? So I do believe that these things are naturally, yeah, what our kids are going to gravitate to as far as police being important or their role in society, but it doesn't have to be provided by a monopoly. And if I had one thing that if I could just grab a conservative's head and shake it into them, is like, look, I'm right there with you. Like, not all police are bad. And I'm not even saying like, let's defund the police and completely abolish all police services. What I'm saying is like, let's have competing services for protection and security agencies. And that alone would give us the choice to vote through our dollar for what's best for our community. And we just don't have that option right now in society. And that's kind of the culprit of all of our ailments within the paradigm of, police and the negative aspects of our interactions with them. So, yeah, if I get it though, I get it. I mean, we all want that somebody out there, whether they're wearing a blue costume or they are some type of private security company, to be looking out for us. And the last thing I'll say here is yes, of course, as libertarian, like we believe in gun rights, we believe in self-ownership and doing that ourselves, but I don't have all day to be patrolling my neighborhoods, right? Like I do believe in the idea of decentralizing these things, the division of labor, and so I'd totally be willing. I think the service that would they be providing from a voluntarily funded protection security service would be night and day difference from what we see now.
The ignorance of what the state is actually about does not really mix well with the bravery that it takes to do that kind of job.
Correct.
And Gustav Molinari, 175 years ago, is on record of being like the first person to ever come up with the idea that security of the public could be provided easier, cheaper, and more efficiently by having it exist on the free market, where competition will breed integrity, and that way we will be. Because look, like I hear where you're coming from, and I agree. It does put the mind at ease a little bit to know that if I'm in a really, really sticky situation and I've done my best to defend myself and I need a little extra help, there's someone out there that's willing to jump in and get my back, but at what expense? That's the question. At what
Exactly.
expense? Because they get it wrong all the time. And we can watch that on Police the Police. All these situations where like you think that these people are out there to get it right and have integrity. Well, your channel, Police the Police, proves that that's not the case, that they are just order following, brainwashed. And maybe you disagree with this, and that's okay. I think they're psychopaths. And there's got to be something done about it. And the only real approach that I see is helping children know that there's a better way, because the future will happen. We talked about that a little bit earlier. What's that future going to look like? We can prepare for that today.
100%, man. Yeah, well, it's just it's all just a lack of incentives, and to me it doesn't have anything to do with, racism, even though obviously there is elements of that in law enforcement, but it's just all an economic issue to me. There's just no incentive to be efficient, to be effective, to improve, or to be accountable to the people who pay their paychecks. So yeah, you're right there. I'm right there with you, and I would agree 100%. I mean, that's the exact reason why we wrote this book. So appreciate you giving me a chance to plug it though.
Dude, whenever there's anybody out there that's trying to like help kids in a real constructive way, I can't help myself but to, give them the time to explain what they're doing,
Sure.
because this is a really touchy subject, because of just how deeply seated this occupation is within the minds of first the youth, and then they grow up to be adults, and they have family members who are in law enforcement or in the military, and they get emotionally attached to them, and they don't want to admit that what they're doing is immoral and goes against the principles of natural law, quite frankly. And if we're going to see any real freedom, we need to start somewhere. Got to speak about these principles and try, keep trying. And I appreciate your integrity and your steadfastness with your approach to never giving up. It's an inspiration, Jason, and you're very humble, and I appreciate that. But it is an inspiration, because many people would have given up by now with the internet censorship that your organizations have had to face, and so I applaud you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of good people, my colleagues over the years have kind of given up, but I don't think that's going to be me, man. I'm not going to tap out. I'm in this for the long haul. So we'll see what happens.
All right, let's wrap up. This has been great. So great to get to know you a little bit more. We'll have to do this again sometime down the road. You're always welcome back. And
Thank you, brother.
so tell people about where they can find your websites, your channels, all that stuff. Because guys out there listening to this, you got to go check out Jason's work, and it's really important stuff. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Well, yeah, the home hub, the home base is the freethoughtproject.com. As I mentioned, we're not putting out the same volume of content what we once were, but we're still putting out at least two, sometimes three, four articles a day over there. So the freethoughtproject.com. While you're there, though, check out our podcast as well, guys. There's a tab at the top. And we're on Spotify, Apple, Podbean, all of them. We've had some great guests over the years. We had Dr. Ron Paul, Dr. Robert Malone, Ben Swan, Peter Schiff, Tom Woods. I mean, like all the Liberty legends, you know. So definitely check that out. And jasonbassler.com is one of the places that you can find the Know Your Rights book. I also wrote a book 2 years ago now, 3 ways to prepare for CBDCs. Again, I know that Trump is saying that he's, banned the CBDC stuff, but I feel like it's still an important read. So if you guys do want to get it ahead of the curve a little bit as far as things that you could do now, not when shit hits the fan, but now, definitely check out my book at jasonbassler.com entitled 3 Ways to Prepare for CBDCs. Other than that, though, I'll just be quick. I'm on pretty much every other social media platform you could think of, but my two big accounts are Twitter, X, which is Jason Bassler 1, and Instagram, which is jason.e.bassler. But thanks, James, so much for this opportunity, man. That was a fun conversation.
Oh, it was fun. You're right. All the links for Jason's stuff, where everything that he just mentioned, will be in the show notes. Go click to your heart's desire, and we'll catch you guys next time.